All right, I'll go ahead and get us started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm excited that we are welcoming Audrey Huang to talk today about research funding. I wanted to point out as we start, this is part of a two-part series. And so today we're going to hear about research funding as an overview, kind of a high level. How do we think about funding and applying for funding? On May 8th at 11 a.m., there will be a second part of this that focuses on writing your specific grant application. So as you think about how do we go from, okay, big picture to I actually want to write it now. So come back for that one too. And I am very, very happy to introduce Audrey Huang, who is at the University of Maryland. She directs science communications there for the Center for Advanced Research Training and Innovation. And she is somebody who has spent a lot of her career thinking about grants and how we talk about the science that we do. So she does a lot of work helping researchers improve the way that they convey the impact of their work. And she's done that now for a number of organizations, including NIH and the Carnegie Institute and the University of Texas Southwestern. She is before that, she spent about 15 years teaching grant writing for Johns Hopkins, which is how she and I met because she was actually my professor at one point. And so I'm very, very happy to introduce her and to have the chance for her to tell all of you a little bit about research funding. So I'm going to turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you everyone for showing up today. And I want to thank NIH writ large for the invitation, and I'm hoping that I can deliver on your expectations for today. As Laura mentioned, this is the first part of a two-part series. It is very high level, but I was told that a high-level introduction is probably most welcome. So let me know in the the Q&A box as we go along, like if there are specific topics that I'm not covering you'd like to hear more about and whatnot. And I'll try to answer them. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a crystal ball. That's my disclaimer. Um, uh, and the other thing is, whatever you may be doing, I invite you to turn on your cameras. There is no judgment, unless you're doing something incredibly weird, but there's no judgment. I just like to see my audience and, know that there's some comprehension. Otherwise, it looks like I'm talking to a blank screen or just my slides. So I leave that up to you, but I invite you to show me your face. Thank you so much. Oh my God, it's so exciting already. Okay, great. So without further ado, we will get started. Let's see. As Laura mentioned, my name is Audrey Huang, and clear science communications are my passion. I trained in molecular biology and genetics. I went on, did a postdoc looking at chromosome structure and nuclear architecture, all in model organisms. Somewhere along the way, I decided that more people needed to understand how exciting chromosome structure and nuclear architecture was, and I was just somewhat disappointed that I couldn't go into any area and any group of people and talk freely about my work. And at no point did I think it was solely the audience or solely me, but there's just there's a mismatch, I think, between how scientists communicate and how the public in particular, but there is no one single public, but how everybody else interprets that information. And so I have taught at all levels how to give talks, to a general audience, how to do media relations, down to how to write your specific aims, and how to format your next manuscript for publication. So today we're going to talk in general about how to think about research funding moving forward. And my understanding is that this is a postdoctoral audience and fellow audience. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the level I've aimed everything at. Okay, so learning objectives, like to get everybody on the same page, what we're going to cover today. Today, I believe we're scheduled for 90 minutes. I don't think we're going to go that long, so there's going to be time for Q&A after, but we're going to cover how to identify appropriate funding sources for your work, understanding or being familiar a little bit with funding cycles, um, understanding NIH funding types and application requirements, talk a little bit about diversifying your funding portfolio. It's always important. It always has been important, especially in light of current change. It's probably more important to be aware of just thinking about different types of funding. And then we'll spend some time on grantsmanship writ large, what it is and how to be good at it. And we'll talk a little bit about reviewers. And it seems like we're jumping ahead a lot, learning how to respond to reviewers. But really, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the reviewers so that you're thinking before you even start writing about your audience and who you're writing for, who you're writing to, because I think that will lessen the challenges that you might face when you do get reviews back once you do the writing. Okay. All right, so starting with identifying funding sources. So obviously, government has historically in this country for the last 75 years been the largest funder of academic biomedical research. In recent years, 20, 30 years, the biomedical pharma industry have also been lumped into the overall dollar amount of research spending. However, as you all know, probably that a lot of the funding that biotech and pharma do for research goes towards proprietary research, and maybe projects that are very directed, are not published, are not the results are not publicly available. And so for you, if you're going into academic science, your funding sources up until earlier this year, we're always guaranteed the largest sources of funding have always traditionally been the US government. NIH being the largest source of funding for biomedical research, but other sources of funding available for those doing biomedical research. National Science Foundation has specific areas that they fund. The Army, a Department of Defense, runs a program called Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. These are generally very focused, but broad, and they will actually also fund international, or they have in the past, international scientists doing the type of research they feel is necessary to advance. So CDMRPs are very good source to look into. And other agencies, government agencies that up until recently had probably more significant funding or consistent funding, PCORI, CDC, FDA, ARC, VA, and then state and local depending on your jurisdiction, often offer biomedical research funding opportunities. And I have three illustrated on this slide: the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund, which is several $1 million. The California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, I'm not sure what their overall budget is, but they have consistently now for, I think, wow, maybe 20 years, had a pool of funding for anything that qualifies as regenerative medicine. And then CPRIT in Texas is a several $billion line item in the Texas state budget that funds investigator-initiated cancer-related research. So these are only three examples that I'm more familiar with than not, but I encourage you as you go out to your future positions to look at your local jurisdictions and see what's available to you. It's not as the dollar amounts are never as large as what NIH, CDMRP, or NSF can offer, but it's money. And oftentimes it's the grant cycle, which we'll talk about, is on a shorter time frame. So it might be some money faster than having to go through a full NIH cycle, which we'll get into in a bit. So government. Even now, when things are in flux, I would still say know what the opportunities are from the various government agencies. Okay, good. So some people can see the slides, and we're having I hope those who cannot see the slides can figure out their teams quickly. My apologies. Other funding sources, non-government funding sources. So private foundations are probably where people are turning very quickly, pivoting right now. These are hit and miss and often very disease focused and very heterogeneous in terms of amount of money, what types of science they fund, but they are out there, and there's a record amount of giving happening in the last decade toward biomedical research. Um, you'll get these slides later today, but there's a link here to a foundation directory. Corporate funding and industry partnerships are also a solution for funding. There's several different ways you can access these. The primary way I would say is to actually work through your institutional, obviously not, maybe not at NIH, but as you become more senior, you land a more permanent position from being a postdoc. Almost every academic medical institution has a corporate um, and industry relationship office. It's usually part of the development office and or the tech transfer office. And they have staff there who keep tabs on opportunities that biotech and pharma are offering for sponsored projects and particular research that companies want to invest in. And then lastly, philanthropy. Also, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there's actually been a record high in private philanthropy toward biomedical research in the last decade. And the development officers at your home institution will be your best contacts for establishing relationships with potential donors based on their interest and your science, and and making the match. So digging in a little bit, NIH, as you all know, because you're there, complex institution, a lot of institutes and centers. I think the critical thing here for everybody is to really investigate what each institute and center does as it continues to exist, and understand how your research may or may not fit into the overall mission and goals of that particular institute. As you're probably aware, every institute has their own mission, every institute has their own budget, and and it unfortunately the onus will be on you to kind of dig in and think about your own research creatively, and then read the mission statements of each institute and their funding priorities to find your best match. But there are tools online for you to help you do this. The first is NIH Reporter, and within it, Matchmaker. NIH Reporter is like my favorite tool. Because you can go in and search anything, you can filter in any which way, and you can find just about anybody doing anything that you may or may not be interested in. You can search by institution, region, state, keywords, name, and it's a great tool to figure out what has been funded previously in an area similar to yours or even identical to your research, and to look at the abstracts of those grants to see how they were written, what the questions were, how they proposed to approach answering the questions, and which IC, Institute or Center, they were funded through, and how much money. So for those of you, and I would recommend starting with NIH because it's the most complex, but it's also got the biggest bolus of dollars still, is to start with Reporter and just start digging around. Take your keywords for your work, plug them in, see what you get. Then use the refinement tools, start reading abstracts, look at how much money, look at the questions, and try to get a good sense what other people have done. Don't reinvent the wheel. People have done this. It is publicly available. You should take advantage of what's publicly available in order to further your own work and make it easier for you. This takes a lot of time. I'm not going to lie about that. It takes a lot of work. It's going to detract from your bench work, but it's worth doing. Spend the time to do it. And then lastly, for NIH, you do have access to program officers in every institute and center. Their job is to liaise with researchers and help researchers navigate the whole system. They are single people. They are human. They are being inundated. Hopefully, they still are employed, but they will get back to you. The few times I've talked to program officers, it's taken a few attempts, but I stay on the email thread. I keep pinging, keep offering my availability times. I won't lie. On some occasions, it's taken a couple months to actually connect with a program officer. But that phone conversation is hugely valuable. Write down all your questions, lay it on them. They will spend the time to talk to you, to understand what you're trying to do. The few that I've talked to have also pointed me in different directions, also within the NIH, to other institutes, to other colleagues and contacts who they feel could help me in additional ways that they cannot. So it's a great way to network within the whole grants process, is to have a personal contact with your program officer. That program officer can help you, and they will also offer, most of them, if they're good ones, to read your specific aims page. We'll get to that much later, but they will offer to help read and review, not to determine whether or not you're a shoe-in for funding, but to help you determine, are you aiming for the right study section? Are you even talking to the right institute or center? Is your question a priority for their institute or center? So they can really help advise. Use them. They're a huge asset. Okay, so I would say, if you haven't done this already, depending on where you are in your career progression, start subscribing to funding opportunity newsletters. And don't just sign up for the emails and let it all filter to some folder you never open in your Outlook. Actually read more than just the subject line. Open them up and read them. Start getting familiar with how often different agencies offer funding, what they announce, what types of things they fund, and just get familiar with the different types of newsletters and listservs and things available. There's a whole bunch of public sources as well as private companies that are moving in on this as well. Talk to mentors and colleagues. If your research is close or identical to your mentors, it probably shouldn't be at this point, but that's where to start. How are they funded? Which institutes have they tried and failed at? Which sources have they applied to and been successful at? Start looking at those first, and then radiate out. If you're hoping to use a different technology or tackle a similar question in a different system, start looking at the folks who are working in kind of going concentric circles and going more distant from your research, and then go back to NIH Reporter, plug in those names, plug in those keywords, and just start investigating, how are people funded? Who's, how much, what kinds of questions, how frequently are they successful, and do that sort of thing. You should all have a mentor, not just a mentor, but a mentorship team. Think about having not just your direct mentor, but having a team of career mentors or technique subject matter expert mentors that you talk to, who are more senior, and that you can, buy them a cup of coffee and have a quick conversation. How should I think about acquiring funding? Where would you suggest I go first? Should I focus on the technology that I'm using first, or, to develop that further? Or is it actually the question? Is it more basic science, or is there translational potential? Like, if you start having these conversations with different folks who have been through this process, they will give you ideas. Not all the ideas are great, but they'll give you more ideas, and take the pressure off a little bit for you to bounce ideas off people. And most people are willing to help. So I encourage you to network more and learn about how others have navigated the whole funding challenge. Attend funding and funder webinars. A lot of private foundations offer webinars when they're about to put out requests for applications, when they're about to release funds, and they want to encourage people to apply, the right people to apply. So attend those, ask questions, listen, figure out what they're really looking for, what that organization, especially the private organizations, what they're really hoping to help achieve. What are, what are their investment goals? Yes, usually it's a cure for a disease, but how are they taking a look at the basic to translational pathway in terms of research? What do they value? And and take home like the key messages. If they're really keen on translational research and you're a basic scientist, how can you present your work to emphasize how much translational potential it has moving forward, right? So learn from the funders as they offer, these days they're mostly webinars, but in the old days, back in the old days, they were more in person. So make contacts with these private funders, and then leverage your institutional resources. The Office of Research Administration at your future home institution usually has experts in managing all the grants process, and will usually at most institutions have a deep knowledge of who has gotten what funding at that institution for how long and what the breadth of funding sources is. Your library at your home institution, also a great resource, especially for a lot of these newsletters and funding opportunity listservs are offered by, even if they're nonprofit organizations, they sell memberships to institutions. So typically it's your library that's going to hold that membership for your entire institution. And so get those access codes and that access information from your library to leverage something that your institution has paid a membership for. And then your development office, tech transfer office, which I don't have up here, they are huge resources in talking to private philanthropists, the corporate foundation opportunities, the sponsored industry projects and all that. So stay informed, but also stay engaged and network. So you're not supposed to be able to read these carefully. These are just two examples of non-NIH funders, what they have on their websites and how they depict like different steps of funding. We'll get into timelines in a bit, but I encourage you, as you find things that are interesting, to read very carefully and follow the instructions. Everybody has a slightly, if you're familiar with it, once you get familiar with the NIH process, I think you'll be able to handle anything. It'll take some time. It's a learning curve to get familiar with the NIH process, but everything else is variation on a theme. What other funders do differently, I would say, is they have faster turnaround times. So be very aware of dates. Many of them have info webinars, recorded past webinars on their websites. Watch those. Some of them have very helpful or not helpful flowcharts, but a lot of them have pre-application or letter of intent requirements. And I know there's letter of intents for some NIH opportunities, but for the other funders, the non-NIH funders, I think it happens to be a little bit more common. And what this means is you actually have to write a letter and say, I would like to apply for this grant application, for this funding opportunity. The green flowchart you see is from the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Project, the Army DoD funding. They require a pre-application. They will evaluate those and the letter of intent, and then they will ask you if they like your letter to submit a full proposal. Ideally, this should save you time and effort because you're only putting in a pre-proposal before knowing whether or not you're worthy of putting in the full proposal. But as I just mentioned, the turnaround times are much faster. So you have to be on it and ready to turn around if you do get chosen to turn around that full proposal. And then the other one is from the American Heart Association. And again, this is small, but it's just a list of webinars of how to write a proposal for AHA, what their deadlines and their key dates are. In this particular example, they've actually said they posted an RFP January 14th, and you can expect the award to start July 1st of the same year. So that means their cycle is pretty fast, and they're putting it all up there for you because in 6 months, they want you to do the pre-proposal. They'll invite you or not to write the full proposal. You'll turn that around that really quickly. They'll make a quick decision. You could have money in 6 months. So as you're doing all of your research and writing papers and all that, it's going to be key that you layer on an organizational system so that you can keep track of all of these moving parts and deadlines. Okay, so just to sum up, get familiar with the different funding sources. Unfortunately, there's not one perfect centralized resource. There's many. So sign up for those listservs and newsletters. Do, if you need to, filter them through your email, but do go in and review them. And especially if now you're just starting out as a postdoc, for example, you still got several years ahead of you before you apply for jobs. You're just curious, but you want to be on the ball. Now's the time. Start doing this. Read. And so you're really familiar. So by the time you're ready to apply, you kind of know what the rhythm is and what the cycles are and what the different organizations are that suit your research, that you fit, your work fits. And so you don't have to do this legwork later as you're applying for jobs and doing interviews and all that stuff. Because there's never a good time for this. It is time consuming. It does take a lot of energy, but you have to carve out time. So the sooner you get used to it, at least, the easier it'll be. Develop a system for keeping track. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every single grant mechanism has a different set of key dates, due dates, prerequisites, requirements, and you'll need to figure out how to keep track of them to not make yourself crazy and to also not allow anything to fall through the cracks. And then, of course, I strongly encourage talking to people early and often. Just do informational discussions with people, find those mentors, find people. If you don't have a loosely defined team of mentors now, go out and start buying people coffee, find people that you fit with, find people that you can talk to who you feel are, wise and understand your situation and personality, but also have the experience in garnering funding themselves. And work up that relationship. You can never network enough. It's valuable to have these, especially if they're outside your current institution, just to have an outside perspective and to have somebody you can bounce ideas off of. And eventually you will need letters and other third-party validation as you advance in your career to keep these folks, in your good graces, and have an existing relationship saves you work in the future. Okay, funding cycles and timelines, and as I like to call it, how to plan your life and career. I am not going to plan your life and career. That's my disclaimer here. But I think just being aware of how long things take and the time frame required will help you plan your life and career a little bit better. So grant process simplified. There's the pre-award phase, which writ large involves what you're doing now, your research. At some point, you're going to write a proposal and you're going to submit it. Everything up until submission is technically pre-award. Notice how there's no time assigned to this on this diagram. Then there's the award phase. This is when things undergo review. You, as the applicant, are just waiting. You're probably doing other stuff, like you're going back to your research, you're writing papers, but you're waiting until you hear word. In some cases, you can negotiate once you get an offer. For some grants, if you're fortunate enough to have a current grant and you're applying for another grant, for some organizations, you can't hold two grants at the same time. So you will have to negotiate an end time for the current grant and a start time for the future grant or the newly awarded grant. Once that's figured out, then you accept your award. That's the award phase. Then the post-award phase is the implementation. The money has dropped, the grant has started. And then it's not, let's go shopping and just keep doing our work. It is about managing that grant, keeping on top of your data. You're going to have to do progress reports, evaluate your success. And in the end, whether you do a renewal or you close out the grant, depending on the source, there's going to be some sort of closeout of the final grant and the budget. So that's all post-award phase. And wherever you end up for your permanent position, there are staff on hand to help you. They don't do it for you, but they help you with the pre-award process and everything you need to know, because a lot of deadlines in pre-award are institution specific. The award phase also, I mean, they're similar variations on a theme, but they will differ from institution to institution. The award phase is very defined, and then the post-award phase, again, there's different staff often to help with managing the budget, the reporting, evaluation, and closeout. So the way to really think about this is a circle. It is a cycle. So you generate an idea and identify your funding. You go through what I just talked about, look at your funding sources that are appropriate for that idea. At some point, you write and submit a proposal, you secure the grant, and then for maybe 3 to 5 years, shorter if it's a private or internal institutional grant, then you manage the award, meaning you spend the money, you do the research, you write the papers, and then before that grant ends, hopefully you've generated a follow-up idea or a totally new idea, and you go through the cycle again. So I want to take a careful look at this bottom part, which is the write submit proposal part and the securing the grant. And, this is a section we're talking about timeline. So in the next slide, this is the American Heart Association example that you weren't supposed to read a few slides ago, but I have pulled it out and made it a diagram. So just plopping it onto 2025, they posted the RFP in January. This is super fast, by the way. Your pre-proposal deadline was due sometime mid-February. So you really it was 5 weeks, I think, between the time they posted the RFP on the AHA website and the pre-proposal deadline due. So if you don't have that pre-written or something already written, it's going to be 5 weeks of really, really focusing on getting something on paper that's good enough to get in by their deadline. And then the March, April, they're reviewing through March and April, and they let people know who is invited to submit a full proposal at the beginning of May. And so that's coming up. Meanwhile, hopefully you already have something in the works, you're feeling good about it. Even if you don't get the invitation to submit to this AHA opportunity, you will find other opportunities to put that writing to good use. We will talk about writing as a habit next time, but this is not, March and April on this diagram are not for you to just go back to the bench and ignore everything. You have to have this in the back of your mind, because your invited full proposal deadline, you get notified sometime in April, and then boom, May 1st, invited full proposal needs to be turned in. And thankfully these days everything's electronic. Back in the day where we had to put stamps on things and run things to the post office, we just had no idea when they would land and whether they would land on time. I'm just dating myself. Anyway, so then you'll get the award notification in June. So they do a very quick peer review through the month of May. They already have their review committee set up and they're ready to go. Once the things come in, they start reviewing and making decisions. They notify you in June, and then your award and post-award support staff at your home institution get ready to receive that money and start that budget on July 1st. Oops. Oh, we went backwards. Sorry. Here's an NIH grant timeframe example. And I've gone backwards in time. This is a 23 to 24 example because I just don't know what's going on right now. And this is actually a real example that I got from an associate professor here at University of Maryland, where they submitted an R1 application for the February deadline in 2023. July is when they got notified. July of 2023 is when they got reviews back. If the reviews had been favorable, then that grant would not have started until December. The black arrows are that first submission. So they submitted in February, they heard in July. If it had been successful, they would not have started the grant until December of that year. However, this application was not successful. So they were invited to resubmit. So they sent their resubmission in. The deadline was November of that year. And then they didn't hear about the resubmission until the next blue arrow, which was March of 2024. And they were successful at that point. So that grant, which they applied for February 2023, did not go into effect until July of 2024. So you're looking at a year and a half from submission to likely grant start. These days, because the pay lines are so narrow, most people do not get their R01 on first try. It does involve submissions sometimes, and I'll show you other examples later. Sometimes people just, table their initial submission, or it's not even read or reviewed, and they have to go back to the drawing board, and it takes a little bit longer than that. So just getting back to the topic of this section, this is about planning, integrating all of these timelines into your current life plan and how you're spending your time, because it's significant and they're varied. And so, and they almost require, I mean, NIH not so much, but they almost require constant attention to a certain degree, especially if you're doing foundation and the private grants, because they're so quick in turnaround. So just some take home about timeline and life planning: develop a plan. I'll show you some examples a little bit later, but you right now are probably masters of your day. You come in, you know exactly what experiments you're doing, you know when journal club is, you know when group meeting is, you know when your clinical duties are, you know when you're doing stuff. This adds a whole other layer of and need for organization on top of what you're doing now. So you really, really, really need a plan moving forward. It needs to be strategic. You need to work in the time. Use tools. If you don't already use project management tools, if you're a user of sticky notes, you'll see behind me in my blurred background, this is not my day or my life, but I'm actually planning out a website here. But this is not the best way to plan out your day to day. So use tools to help you project manage your own life. And I just give you some examples of commonly used project management tools that are not expensive and I think are fairly user-friendly. Stay on top of your deadlines. Carve out time daily to do this. It needs to be where it can't be an afterthought. It needs to be worked in. I think once you have it mastered before you need to master it, then it becomes rote, and you'll have a much easier time managing the many moving parts. And there are many moving parts. And the last thing I want to leave you with for just getting organized is applying for funding is a marathon. If anybody's done any distance running, it is about slow, consistent work. It is not a sprint. You cannot sprint to get funding. It just doesn't work. The deadlines don't work that way. The process doesn't work that way. Your application will probably suffer. So think of it as working in a long-term endurance training plan. And for those not athletically inclined, I'm sorry, but you're going to be a marathon runner by the end of this anyway. So digging into NIH, my first slide is really, and you're probably all familiar with this, my huge disclaimer in that things are changing in real time, and it's very hard for me and you and everybody, quite honestly, to figure out what is going on. But keeping that in mind, I'm giving you the overview of what I know now, what exists as of right now, and we'll have to adjust as things change with NIH and beyond. Side note, if you have not read, where's that book? Who Moved My Cheese? It's a tiny little book. I get no royalty or nothing from promoting this, but if you have not read Who Moved My Cheese, it's a very quick read. You should read it right now. It's very appropriate for right now. It's all about managing your response to change. It is a time for who's for following the cheese. Okay. So the first thing about NIH is NIH has a special early investigator ESI status. You likely, most of you fit into ESI status being postdocs. In fact, I don't think anybody here should not be ESI status if you're a postdoc, but know your status and make sure it's in your ERA Commons profile. You get special dispensation for being an ESI. You're not supposed to be able to read the small print on the diagram. But just know that there's an example here in this table. You get a bump in pay line if you're ESI. So this is also something to keep in mind as you're planning your life out, because you want to stay ESI. You want to start applying during your ESI phase as the NIH continues to give early stage investigators special dispensation. So keep an eye on it. Make sure that your status is reflected in your ERA Commons account. If you don't know what that is, sorry, there's a typo here. Your ERA Commons profile, not your profile. Google it, and it's very easy to set up. But just an example, as a early stage investigator grant applications get pooled separately, they get reviewed separately, and they actually get prioritized almost all the time, I believe, at NIH for many different grant mechanisms. So this gives you a leg up as you're just starting your career, and you want to make sure that you're recognized as ESI, your status is recognized, and that you're applying within your window of being an early stage investigator. I believe it's 10 years past your terminal training, but don't take my word for it. Please verify that online. So NIH funding mechanisms. The diagram shows you the complete spectrum of NIH mechanisms. We're obviously not going to be dealing with pre-bac or graduate medical student because I assume that you all are past that stage. But we're looking at early mid career opportunities. But just so you have a full picture of everything that's offered, there's a whole bunch of different mechanisms. The ones I want to focus on for you are the Mentored Career Development Awards and the Research Awards. So these are the two classes of funding mechanisms that I think would be most appropriate for you all to start looking at given your stage in your career. So Mentored Career Development Awards are also known as K Awards. They support additional training, which you're probably thinking, I'm a postdoc or a fellow right now, like, God, do I need additional training? Make it stop. But maybe you're not thinking that. But the whole point of that is to formally support additional training. If you apply for a K Award, the K mechanism requires you to have a mentoring team. So rewind to what I said earlier, start networking, start developing that informal mentoring team. One of the reasons why you want to start doing this now, if you're very early in your postdoc, is that if you have your eye on a K Award, and most people do K Awards, especially if they're in clinical fields, before applying for an R01, because it buys you more training time, but it also buys you more time to generate that preliminary data. R01s are incredibly competitive. K Awards can be, but there are many more K mechanisms, and they are less focused on the actual research project and more focused on investing in you as an investigator. So there's benefit to the K Award. They do require, for those who have clinical responsibilities, 75% protective effort. If you are in a surgical subspecialty, that may be negotiable, I think, down to 50%, depending on your home institution. Definitely something to think about, but it's a completely different framework in terms of how to apply and how your application should read versus the research awards, which is the R series, the R01s and the R03s and all of those awards. Research awards, the R grants, support independent research projects. They require you to be an independent investigator and show that you have the expertise all of the expertise required in your application to successfully complete your research project. This is why the K Award, for those of you finishing fellowship, postdoc, and moving to independence, is something to strongly consider, because it allows you to not have all of the required expertise, but to spend the time during this grant to gain additional expertise. We'll go a little bit further into that in the next slide. So Mentored Career Development Awards. The requirements are varied. The different mechanisms are varied. If you're not familiar with NIH K Kiosk, this is a great place to start on the web. You can see current funding opportunities, the types of grants, the mechanisms, and the actual opportunities that are available right now. I would recommend strongly, if you're interested in K Awards, if you go to this website, the K Kiosk, and start reading and see something that's interesting, to talk to program officers immediately about eligibility. If you can't apply now, when can you apply? Some of these have citizenship requirements. Some of them have mentorship and timing requirements. They're varied and inconsistent, I would say. That's from whichever institute or center is offering the opportunity. So, like I said, though, the K Awards they will extend your training. You will be independent, but you will be independent without many resources. Maybe you don't have a full lab yet. Maybe you don't have enough preliminary data yet. Maybe you're a bench scientist, but you're really interested in patient outcomes, but you're not a clinician, and you need to figure out a way to marry your expertise with a collaborator. These are opportunities to really leverage a K Award to gain that expertise, to build that research network and portfolio, and to publish additional papers to make you more competitive for the R Awards. R Awards. There's 3 types of announcements for R Awards. The R series, they're more consistent. There are the bread and butter of research funding. The requirements are all listed in funding opportunity announcements, FOAs. And there's basically three types of funding opportunity announcements. There's a parent announcement, which is broad and sometimes non-specific, and these are for investigator-initiated research. There are program announcements, which are also abbreviated PA, PAR, PAS. These involve one or more institute or center. They are more specifically focused on an area of research, a specific problem, a specific disease. And then there are requests for applications, or RFAs. These also involve a smaller number of institute centers, not as broad. They're very narrow in scope. These are earmarked funds to solve specific problems. So anything congressionally earmarked or otherwise will end up being an RFA, because somebody else has decided they wanted exactly a narrow problem solved. Sorry, and then this bottom part is a typo. Don't use the K Kiosk to find an R Award. Okay. So you may be asking, yes, but I hear everybody talking about R1s. I don't hear about many people talking about Ks. What's the difference? Why should I do this? So here's the comparison. So the K Award, again, I said it develops you. The goal is it's actually a training award, but to develop you as a researcher. The decision made at the end of whether or not you get a K is whether or not the committee deems that you are worthy of investment, that they're going to decide, oh, this person is going to be successful. We should offer them additional time and funds to get, additional expertise because we believe they will be successful. The R award is really to advance research and knowledge. It's not about you as an investigator as much as it is about the research project itself. K awards are smaller in dollar amount. They're really funding you at a 75% effort salary. And usually the resources to do the work come from your mentors if there's additional costs to doing the research. Our awards fund you at a much smaller effort, your salary meaning, and come with a larger price tag to fund your lab and the costs associated with seeing the project through to completion. The focus of the K Award, again, is you and your future success as a researcher. You are a worthy investment. The focus of the R Award is that the proposed research project is worthy of investment and when successful, will significantly advance the field. So as you may glean from this, the two applications will have to look very different because the K Award really needs to provide supporting evidence that you have the appropriate mentorship. The question you're posing, the scientific question you're posing, requires you to spend some time getting additional training from these mentors to be successful. And it's really focused around who's supporting you and you as an individual. Whereas the R Award, the supporting data, your application really needs to focus on rigor and reproducibility, that your research is feasible, that it's innovative and new enough, that it will be impactful, you're asking a worthwhile question, and that you have the proven ability already to lead a team to success in answering these questions. And then the team involved in the K versus the R. So you will assemble a team of mentors for the K Award. It's required for the K Award. And your mentors will be 5, 6, 7 people with varying expertise that kind of umbrella everything that you need to help you advance your own career and the work that you're proposing. Whereas the R Award, you are leading your lab team and you are directing all the work that's being done. So the deliverables, so what you end up with at the end of your K Award or your R Award, what you end up with at the end of a K Award is you have additional publications, but you also have enough preliminary data that you can start applying for R Awards. You have that time as an independent researcher, you have the publications, you have the CV, you have the data, and then your next natural step is to apply for an R. The R, what you end up with is advancing the field, more publications, and the impact. Okay, so I mentioned before, you need a plan. This is a lot of moving parts, a lot of timing. There are standard NIH due dates, but it says here in small print, check your funding opportunity for opportunity-specific due dates. Not all opportunities or programs use standard due dates. Of course, there's always the exception to the rule. So stay on top of key dates. Use a calendar, use planners. Not all opportunities use standard dates. Your institution, also, this is important to know, for the pre-award process, your home institution will require all of your materials to be turned into them because they hit send, not you. All of the stuff needs to go to them before the NIH deadline. So, and that will depend on your home institution. Many institutions will require a much earlier deadline so that they can review everything. Some actually review to the point where they will send stuff back to you and say, you should change this and make recommendations for improving your application. Generally not about the science, but usually it's formatting, budget, and some of the other supporting materials. But give yourself enough time and be aware of these dates, not just the NIH dates, but you're going to have to backtrack into what your institution needs and what you need to be successful and not frantic at the end. So something to keep in mind. Okay. NIH funding, no matter what is happening now, is still the gold standard. I'm not going to change my tune to that until we actually see permanent change. But what I'm telling people right now is don't worry about the things that you don't know about, and keep your eye on the prize. You're trying to advance your career. This has historically, for 75 years, this has been the gold standard. It still is. So get familiar with the funding mechanisms. Do not panic. Stay on top of the deadlines. Assume things will stay close to what we know, how we know them. Read the funding opportunity announcements very carefully and start talking to people. Talk to people, get more information, talk to people, feel comfortable about the process. Okay, diversifying. So even pre-2025, it was important to diversify your portfolio. U.S. government is the biggest funder of research in biomedical research in this actually in the world, for especially basic and mechanistic research. But it can't fund everything, and not everybody gets an R1 on their first try. So think from the very beginning about diversifying your portfolio. So I'm just throwing this out there because you may think this will be you, this may not be you. This is a sample funding portfolio of a real full professor at University of Maryland. You'll notice, I think he has 7 or 8. These are all R01s. You're not really supposed to be able to read it, but these are all current and all active. And I would say this is as rare as a hen's teeth. Guess what? Chickens do not have teeth. It's very rare. So do not beat yourself up, is my lesson, if you do not end up with 8 R01s. This should not be a goal of yours. This is a guy, he's a machine. He's very productive. He is incredibly rare. If you see a chicken with teeth, please take a picture and send it to me. Don't set yourself up for that kind of disappointment. Be realistic from the start. This is unrealistic. Possible, but unrealistic. So here's a sample funding portfolio and timeline from yes, this is a clinical. She's currently an associate professor. She landed her first faculty position in 2015. So the first thing she did was secure an internal career development award from that home institution. She needed to hit the ground running. She's a clinician, like I said, so her time was split. She was 50% clinical and then 50% research, protected research time. And she got this internal career development award, which allowed her to say 50% and do some research, and start generating data, basically. She applied for it, and I'm not sure when. So that's the gray boxes on this chart are the times when she submitted applications, and the colored boxes are the actual duration of successful awards. So the top line was her hit the ground running. She got an internal institutional award that may have even come with her job. I'm not entirely sure. It may have been part of her package. She then at some point landed a K award, a NIH Career Development Award. And I believe it came, well, let's just say, so that allowed her to generate, I'm not gonna guess, but it allowed her to generate data during that time, maintain protected time. Again, she's a clinician, so she had to be in the clinic some period of time, still, I believe, around 50%. But the K Award allowed her to maintain her 50% protected time to generate data and spend half her time on research. In 2020, she submitted an NIH R03. This is a small award. It's a shorter award. But she was successful, and that award started in 2021 and went for 3 years. Great. It also overlapped with her K award. That can't be true. I think it depends on the mechanism, but I'm not sure it overlapped with her K award, but it gave her at least continuous funding. So also in 2020, she submitted a PCORI grant. It's an R01 equivalent from PCORI. She's, again, I said, a clinician, so interested in patient outcomes. This fits her research portfolio. She was successful in that. So in 2021, she got that award started, and she got a no-cost extension in that. So that's why that green line goes long. She submitted an NIH R01 grant in 2021, and it was not funded. She did not resubmit that, but in 2022, she submitted that same grant, retooled, updated again, and again, it was not funded. So then she may have gotten desperate, I'm not sure. She turned around and submitted, oh, and in 2020, she also submitted a small internal institutional grant. That she got, that's the blue line. And so that got awarded almost immediately. And then she submitted a completely different R01 to a different institute center this time. And guess what? That finally got funded. So she has an R01 award now, continuing through, I believe it terminates in 2027, and she expects that she'll be able to get a cost extension for that. And then in there, she also she found a foundation opportunity and retooled her NIH application for a foundation application and got a short-term foundation and smaller grant there too. This is what successfully diversifying your portfolio looks like. This is why it's important to recognize the whole cycle, the different dates and deadlines. As I said, this person is a clinician, so they have patients, less time to focus on research than a basic scientist. But she's managed to stagger and apply, not always successfully, might I add, to different opportunities to now maintain for quite a number of years now, continued funding. So this is the sort of model you want to think about planning for as you look at your career, as you're finishing your postdoc and transitioning into a more permanent position. So next I'll show you, this is an associate professor. He's an associate professor now, but a basic scientist. So this person finished their postdoc in 2013 and then was hired someplace as a senior research scientist, where they were senior research scientists for 5 years. At the start of their job, he submitted several NIH grants, an R03, an R21, and a K08, and a foundation grant, and internal grant. So he was like just cranking them out and sending them in. None of them were successful except for the internal institutional grant. So that went into effect almost immediately. It was a very quick turnaround. And so he had some money. So then he starts generating data and he gets publications. Then he's actually promoted at the end of that grant to assistant professor. Super. So now he actually has the status to apply for other grants that he may not have had as a senior research scientist, he may not have qualified for before. So the first thing he did was apply for a state grant, got an itty bitty state grant. But it was money. So that lasted just a couple of years, but it bought him some time. Now, again, he's assistant professor to submit more grants. So he submitted internal institutional grants, 2 of them. Both of them were funded. And so he had double the money again immediately. That overlapped the state grant. That was okay with both funding institutions. Then during that time, he submitted an R01 grant. That got funded. At the same time he submitted the R01, he submitted an NIH R21, smaller term grant, smaller dollar grant, and shorter time frame grant. That got funded. So now he has overlapping. For a while there, he had several overlapping funds, but for a couple years, he's got 2 NIH grants going. Then at that point, he's promoted to associate professor. And again, he continues to submit for institutional and internal grants as they're available and relevant to his research, which is great because he's successful now. Submitted R01, not funded. Submitted a state grant, funded again, and for a new state grant. Submitted an R01, boom, finally it's stuck. And he's good for the next 5 years. So, and that just landed this year. So what you should take away from this is the consistent attempts and the success over years, and looking at, how can you make sure that you have some money coming in, and how are you leveraging the different sources of funding that are available to you to apply on a regular basis through these cycles to get yourself off the ground. But these are two examples, and I think they're pretty solid examples of how you can model your own career progression. Just a little break for humor. How it's supposed to work and how it really works is you do research, get results. They don't publish them yet. Call them preliminary. Write a grant to explain what you already did. Get the money. Now you can publish your preliminary results, and then you can spend that money doing something new that's not on the grant. So there is some reality to it. You can't really get the grant. It takes money to get money. It takes data to get the data. So think about what's your preliminary data. You need to think about the time frame of this and how you're leveraging your time and resources. Okay, that's enough for humor. Okay, so another way to diversify funding is to collaborate. Science is already a team effort. Successful collaborations bring together different skill sets. They allow you to do more and answer complex problems. Nature had a really nice thing online, still online, on just how to collaborate and what you need to think about. But collaborations, most importantly, in terms of funding, offer you new opportunities to seek funding as multi-PI, where a grant application can have several different PIs. You can look it up on the NIH website. This is a great way also to expand your work, to collaborate, answer bigger questions. The only thing I would warn you about is if you want to do multi-PI or a collaboration and you have never had a grant before, read the fine print very carefully, because as an early stage investigator, you may lose that status, or you may not qualify for early stage investigator review status if you're collaborating people who are more senior. So just look at that very carefully. I've said this before, cultivate your professional network. This is an aside, part of collaboration, but cultivate that network anyway, right? Because if you cultivate the network, you can get potential collaborators, potential reviewers for your papers and grants, potential mentors, references you'll need for promotion from people outside your institution and across the field. You'll need this network time and time again during your career, so cultivate it now. And a professional network also offers you opportunities to volunteer, do volunteer work, sit on boards, participate in other activities that help toward promotion and make you a better person, and also offer you opportunities and lines to maybe future jobs. Finding collaboration opportunities, check your home institutional tech transfer office, talk to your home development, corporate foundations, relations people, institutions with NIH funded clinical translational science awards, CTSA programs often have built in or are cultivating partnerships with industry collaborators. There's a lot of academic industry, public-private networks and groups that you can join, belong, attend meetings, and obviously also networking at your professional society conferences, national conferences, international conferences. So plan ahead and diversify. Repurpose proposals for institutional foundations and smaller grants. Keep applying at a regular cadence. Expand your network and collaborate when it makes sense. If your research is applicable, try different NIH institutes and centers. So, okay, I have 20 minutes left. I'm going to blow through grantsmanship really quick, and then we will probably review this. I'm going to not leave you on a total cliffhanger, but hopefully it'll entice you to join us for the second session in a few weeks. So what is grantsmanship? Grantsmanship is the art of obtaining grants. It's the activity of persuading somebody to give you money for a reason, the ability or skill of obtaining grants. So there's 10 aspects of good grantsmanship. I think most people think about grants as it's got to have the science, it's got to be written. Got to have the science, it's got to be written well. Grantsmanship is so much more than that. And we'll go through this list as the slides progress. So don't feel like you need to read everything right now. So the first aspect of good grantsmanship, obviously, you do need to have a good scientific idea. You need to present a compelling, sometimes hypothesis-driven question. It needs to be well contained. You cannot solve all the ills of the world in a 2 or 3 year or 5 year grant timeline. You need to show why the question is important, innovative, and ready for investigation now. The timing is important. If you want to answer a question, but the technology doesn't exist yet, and you're not building the technology as part of your proposal, then you have a problem. Then it won't be doable. So keep it doable. Okay. Grantsmanship, you have to be aligned with the funder. Make sure each application is tailored to the goals of the funder or the request for proposals. Use their language and key terms. Reference their mission and goals and statements and initiatives in your proposal. Keep that in mind. That is what they're looking for. That is incredibly important to them. Your grants need to be well structured and readable. Use very carefully headings and bullet points. Don't clutter your pages. We'll get to the writing part next time, but think about the overall structure. Make it easy on the eyes. Minimize the jargon. Include signposting. And next we'll do this. And next we'll do that. In case you forgot, back in AIM 1, I suggested this. So here in AIM 2, we're going to look at this other aspect of it. So lead the reader. It should be very readable. I think the most critical part, and this may have been bearing the lead of successful grantsmanship, is to have a strong specific aims page. Oftentimes, this is the only thing reviewers will read carefully. It could be do or die, make or break with the specific aims page. So I encourage you to really think about and spend the time on your specific aims page. Your whole approach should be rigorous and challenging, but at the same time feasible. So with this, you need to think about contingency plans. As you know, being a researcher, not everything works. Sometimes things work on the first try, sometimes they don't work on the 10th try. So work that in, think about what you're going to propose in case something blows up, how you're going to explain that, why that's not your first choice approach, why it's an alternative, and how you might interpret what's happening biologically speaking in case your hypothesis is just wrong. How do we still get something out of the whole experience? That's what you need to include in thinking about a rigorous and feasible approach. Needs to be challenging, needs to be doable, needs to hopefully give you an expected answer, but also in case it doesn't happen, what are you going to do? You need to show that you have a strong research environment that's conducive to leading to positive and successful results. You need to showcase your expertise without bragging. You need to explain clearly roles and responsibilities. If you have collaborators, you need to explain why you're collaborating with them. What skills do they bring to the table that you don't have? You need to be able to anticipate critique. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can tell the future. But if you have other people read your grant enough, people will come up with red flags. I'm worried about this. You don't say enough about that. You need to be able to address those preemptively as well as best you can. This is part of the writing part. You need a compelling narrative. The person reading it, the reviewer, needs to care why. Why is this question being answered? Like, why is it important to even answer this question? It's not just like, oh, I'm going to answer this question because I'm doing this experiment because I want to know. That's not compelling. So tell a story. Explain why it's so important to do this now. And then the writing part that people often think about, proofread again, typos, formatting issues. Sometimes formatting issues are a deal breaker for a grant. In fact, I was involved in a grant proposal, NIH grant proposal just last fall, where it was a massive training grant that went in and got kicked back by NIH immediately. We are not going to review this. You have included biosketches in a section that does not allow biosketches. Boom, that's it. We spent 4 months, I don't know how many person hours on it, and that was it. It was a formatting issue. Tragic, devastating. In fact, I think my department chair went through all 7 stages of loss over it. It was crushing. So be very careful at this last part and consider hiring a professional editor. And then last but not least about grantsmanship, budget. Make sure it's realistic, justified. Make sure your biosketches are in the right place and they're updated and all of your paperwork is compliant. So in the last 3 minutes that I'm going to talk a little bit about your audience and then we'll end for today. So know your audience and write for your audience. Consider your audience very carefully. Your reviewers are your audience. Know who they are. They're your for NIH, they're scientific review officer, they're the study section members. Don't assume that they know exactly what you know. Look up these people. They're on the website. Always, always, always think about your audience. This is not just for getting funding. This is for giving a talk and everything. But particularly when you're writing your grant proposal, you are not writing for your mentor. You are not writing for your colleagues. You are writing for strangers you probably don't know who sit around a big table and God bless them, volunteer their time to do this. They don't know what you know. You don't know who they are. So, but what you do know is what matters to them. They have been charged with judging the science of a particular field. So focus on what matters to them. If it's the NIH, focus on improving human health. If it's need to know, stick with the need to know information. Don't give all extraneous information. Stick with minimal information you need to know to understand the proposal. Start with the bottom line. Explain the problem you want to solve first and then back into it. We'll go into this next time. Use plain language, avoid jargon as much as possible. People get lost in alphabet soup. You, I'm sure, as a reader, get frustrated when you're reading something, you don't know what the writer's talking about, and they didn't define it. So aim for lower common denominators. I cannot stress this enough. We all get into our own thing and we write for people at our level, and inevitably you are losing your reader. Your reader here is the reviewer. It's the way you say it, probably, and not exactly what you're saying. So if you haven't adequately aimed your proposal to your audience, you'll get reviews that disagree with you, that are confused, that ask a lot of questions. And I'm going to advise you to not be emotional and understand that what you're getting is a readout of what the reviewers did not understand. So you need to separate that. Was it the science or was it how you explained it? Is the science illogical? Is the idea not solid? Or is just the explanation about it not solid? So then what you need to figure out is how do you make it clear? If it's a science, you need to go back and think about the science. Are you really answering your question with the experiment proposed? What kind of results will you get? Does that make sense? If it's the language of how, make it clearer. Write it in different ways. Ask people to read it. Ask people to read it. Ask people to read it while you're writing it. Try new ideas. Ask people to read it again. You must address every point that the reviewers bring up. You cannot ignore anything. They're bringing it up for a reason. It's because they didn't understand it. Don't get mad about it. You're not less worthy of a person because they've asked you that. It just means it's not clear. So I hope we've covered all these things today. I am happy to answer any questions.
Audrey, thank you so much. This was amazing. There are a ton of questions, so I'm going to try to summarize and put some together where I can. One question, as we're on the writing part here, there are a couple questions about, can we reuse writing? How much can we reuse? If I'm applying one place and then I'm going to apply to another place, how new does it have to be? And you talked also about tailoring to the specific organization. So can you touch on how much you can reuse?
Always tailor it, never cut and paste and just send it in. Always tailor it. But yes, I mean, you're working on one project for the bulk of your career. It's going to read similarly. But the lazy person's approach to grant writing is, I'm going to take this entire chunk of stuff that somebody has written, maybe me, hopefully me, but maybe it could be my mentor, and then I'm going to plop it in here. It's not going to make any sense to anybody, and it's not, I've paid no attention to the FOA or the RFP or anything, and I'm not even giving a nod to the mission of the organization that I want money from. Don't do that, right? And that's why I'm saying read the things very carefully, reuse some of that language from their mission, from the request for proposals in your proposal. Repetition is a good thing. Don't paraphrase yourself for the sake of paraphrasing yourself. It's okay to use the same within a piece of writing, same terms over and over again, especially if they're technical, just to make sure the reader understands you're talking about the same thing over and over again. But from application to application, don't send the same application to 5 different people. Just like don't send the same job application to 5 different companies. Each company is slightly different. Hopefully, you're addressing just don't do things en masse like that. But yes, whole chunks of don't rewrite your methods because you don't want to paraphrase yourself. Your methods are your methods. You're not plagiarizing yourself if your methods are your methods. Don't get all creative doing that. It's just going to come out yucky, for lack of more technical terminology.
Yeah, thank you. And then, given the modern moment, somebody was brave enough to ask, we have all these large language models available now. Is there a role at all for AI in grant writing? And if so, what is it?
Yes. Use the tools that you have, but be very transparent about using them. For non-native English speakers, I would say large language models are like a godsend, right? If you have problems with grammar and putting sentences together, they're a great tool for refining something that's already written. However, big caveat, most of these large language models are being provided by private companies who are using your input to train their models. If you are putting in unpublished yet sensitive information to a large language model, they are keeping that information and using it to train. It'll appear in somebody else's search. So be very careful about using large language models when it comes to unpublished data, original hypotheses and thinking. But with that, I would say use them. I use them all the time. I have not used them to write a whole paper. I have used them to, it's all also about how good your prompts are. But I've used them to help me outline things or to put things in the right order and I'm only using the free version. I'm too cheap. I can't even bring myself to pay for a service yet. And I'm just starting and investigating. But I'm also very, I will say to my boss, look, this is what ChatGPT came up with, I made some amendments, react to it, and I'll add more ideas. But I'm very clear about when I've just thrown my hands up and decided to let the computer do it. It's not perfect though, so you have to fact check. And the references they come up with are poo. So don't trust them at all, but they can really help refine language for non-native English speakers, and they are useful for helping with flow and organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll add one tiny additional caveat, which is that they hallucinate like crazy.
Yes.
So if you ask for something that makes you the best at this thing, it's often going to make you the best at that thing, no matter what your actual resume says. So keep that part in mind. Make sure it's true. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We have a largely international audience. And so I want to ask, of grant opportunities that you talked about, or maybe even some that you didn't, what do you see as international opportunities? And are there things that resources that you suggest for international folks that are in the US looking for training in the US? And is there anything you suggest for folks that want to do an international job search as well?
So I'm not entirely familiar with folks who want to do an international job search, what funding opportunities are. That's just not my forte, and I apologize for that. I will say that the congressionally directed medical research projects of the Army, DoD, they fund non-citizens working in the US. They also fund research projects that they think are worthy of funding that are happening internationally. So they go both ways. So, but they're very particular in what they want to fund. There's a lot of cancer, there's a lot of brain injury. But definitely look at those because that is one opportunity I have personally known at least I think J1 visa holders to successfully secure.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. You talked about those really great timelines to see how people held funding throughout a career as a faculty member. There were several questions around then
Yeah,
about how does this work in terms of keeping a job? How does it work in terms of promotion? Like, do I have to have a grant to maintain a faculty job? Do I have to have a grant, an R01 to get that next promotion? How does that look?
I think I would say it's really dependent on your institution. And I think right now we are in an incredible time of flux. I mean, not just 2025, but I would say in the last decade, many academic medical centers, for example, have really broadened their uh, ranks. So people have split out clinical faculty members from the research faculty members more so than they ever have been in the past. It used to be that you would go someplace and you would be a faculty member, but there are now different classifications and sub-classifications at many different institutions because there are a lot of people who maybe have come up through a research career, but then don't want to do it and decide they want to be 100% clinical, 80% clinical, like they want to, and so they don't want to be held to needing to garner their own salary for quite honestly to be able to do the work they want to do. So that's becoming more and more common, but I'd say it varies widely throughout the country. So yes, I would say these two people are successful, have been successful in timing and managing. And of course, I told you I actually don't know what their expertise is, except for that one is clinical and one was basic science. So yes, you will need to show in your promotion package that if it's required of your rank to move to the next rank, and like I said, that's very institution specific, that you've hit all the requirements and that maybe funding a certain number of publications, a certain number of publications in high impact journals, it really will depend on your home institution. And so I can't give a general answer for that, but I would say that if you look at these two examples that I gave, it's not surprising they got promoted when they did. And I would say both of them are on a fairly tight and accelerated path, but it's because they have been very rigorous about applying for the grants in a kind of regular fashion.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. We're right at time, and I want to keep us on time. So I guess as a closing question, I'll ask, when you think about grant cycles, thinking about applying for funding, not necessarily the writing, but just the application and planning it out, what are two or three biggest mistakes that you see people make?
Don't give enough time. Don't do enough research, like literature searching. In the end, do a scoping review before you even embark on deciding what your actual project will be. Know the literature. Um, Time. I think time and then time and then time. Not enough time to really solidly think about the science. Haven't done enough literature digging to really understand the field. And then not giving yourself enough time to do the writing and not giving yourself enough time to get the feedback. And time.
Yeah. Awesome. Audrey, thank you so much for doing this. This was incredibly valuable. And I'm sorry you aren't in the room to hear the applause, but I feel sure it's there. So thank you very much. And a reminder to everybody, I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. Feel free to email me and I can always compile and get to Audrey if I don't have the answer. We will have another one of these on May 8th that's going to dig much more into the actual writing. So May 8th at 11 a.m. we'll have Audrey back. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
You're welcome. And email me if you'd like.
We will leave the Q&A open as well, so you can keep asking questions and we'll answer them in the Q&A after the event too.
Perfect. Thank you all. Audrey, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope it, hit the spot.